Good morning. What is this, you might ask? This is a summer edition can of a fizzy drink, a soda, a pop from New Zealand, L&P, or Lemon and Paeroa. And Paeroa is a small town south of Auckland in the North Island of New Zealand. And so that's what the Paeroa is for. Stands for the spring water that's used in making of this lemon and Paeroa drink. And Australia has things like the Big Banana at Coffs Harbour and, all these landmarks around the country, the big pineapple up at Nambour and the giant prawn and that sort of thing. And New Zealand has a large Paeroa bottle in the center of their little town, and that is where the case is based, this is where this murder occurred that I'm going to talk to you about, just in correlation to the Delphi murders. Hi, Grunge Truck. So L&P, this is the only can I could find. It comes in a glass bottle normally. And this is a summer edition. Normally it's just brown with yellow writing, and it's a fizzy drink. It's very sweet. It's not very tasty at all. And but when I was a teenager, I used to drink it with Southern Comfort. And, used to drink Southern Comfort and L&P. So I've been listening to a podcast. I thought it would be interesting to find a case that's unsolved, that has a reasonable amount of information available, and yet enough twists and turns and enough speculation, enough confusion, etc., so that, you can sort of, I look a bit blotchy because I put lots of color on my face, but I haven't put foundation on or anything. I hope I don't look weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Just to sort of show, okay, what happens in other cases? What can we see and get some insight or get some perspective on in comparison to the Delphi murders? Because, of course, with Delphi, there is a shit ton of, speculation, gossip. And the reason why, not only because, this is a very sad case, the one in Paeroa is the Delphi murders. But, they involve small towns and rural communities with some sort of claim to fame kind of thing, and if anything were to happen, that whole town would be destroyed. It's the same for Delphi as it is in Paeroa, because for Paeroa, they had just won, Town of the Year back in 2012 when Jordan Voudouris was murdered, and Delphi is trying to make a claim towards being known as, a town of history with the trails, etc. And, the murder of girls on the trails, it's reason to cover it up. It's reason to cover the murder up. It's a reason for townsfolk to be very bitter and scared. Their livelihoods are relying on people coming, people stopping in the town and not circumventing the town. So I'll give you a bit of background so I can just try and bring some structure in. But there's a lot of information, so I'm actually not going to just give you this blow by blow. I'm going to just talk today, start off with timelines and go from there. So let me just try and pull this together with a bit of clarity, because I've been, haven't made much sense yet. So what I'm doing is comparing the murders of Abby and Libby, the Delphi murders in small town Carroll County, Indiana, with a case from New Zealand. It's a little bit older. Jordan, I'm not sure if I think it might be Voudouris or Voudouris. He's of Greek heritage. He was a 55-year-old man just days before his 56th birthday, who was murdered 18th of June 2012 in a small town, like right there in town. And to date, the case is unsolved. And what's interesting, for comparison value of these cases is that, just the settings, maybe the characters, the town is as much a character as are the townsfolk. Paeroa is full of character. Paeroa lies nestled in the Hauraki Plains before the Karangahape Gorge. You come down from Auckland, which is the main centre in the North Island of New Zealand. Auckland is at the isthmus before it goes up to Northland on the tip of New Zealand. And Paeroa is down before the Coromandel Peninsula. It's down nestled at the base of the Coromandel Peninsula at the end of the Hauraki Plains, near towns with beautiful names such as Te Aroha. And you go through Paeroa to get to places like Waihi, to Katikati, which we just call Katikat, and there's a gorge in between Waihi and Waihi Beach and Paeroa called the Karangahape Gorge. It's treacherous, it's so beautiful, and the entire area is very rural, and there's a lot of bush, but you soon break in away from plains into more green, lush, rolling hills, and this goes down sort of east of places like Hamilton, but it's going down towards Rotorua and the Thermal Springs area. And on that east coast of New Zealand, it's white beaches, it's surf beach. You've got the Coromandel Peninsula to the northeast of Paeroa with famous towns like Thames, and there's a lot of history there as well. And it's just beautiful. And the west side of Coromandel Peninsula looks up toward Auckland across a very shallow, so this bright, light blue, sort of that nearly milky aquamarine sort of water, In fact, all that water up through there, it's just like, say, with Brisbane, where we've got, well, it's much more pretty in Auckland, though, with the big islands that are in the bays there, it creates this, the shallow harbours and things. It's not like the deep harbours of Sydney that then open out into the wild Pacific Ocean. Creates a very specific, special environment. And these little towns, just like any towns, you've got people that have lived there for decades, born and raised, sometimes move away, come back, go to places like Sydney, come back, start farming there again. These sorts of things. You've got lots of lost souls trying to hide away there. There's some interesting characters. One in particular we'll talk about with regards to this timeline in this talk. So Paeroa itself, just would have been probably 1992 to put itself on the map, for something other than, hey, having a big Paeroa bottle in this, but, being a supply town, I guess, to surrounding industry, having a little bit of infrastructure around for the rural community. They wanted to put themselves on the map, and they had a street bike race. So this is a motorcycle race around the main streets of Paeroa. So one of the main streets, it's oh dear Lord, there's an actual name for it, because where did they put the map? Because we want to know that. Belmont Street, but it's really the State Highway 1. It's Pacific Highway, and is it State Highway 1? Maybe not, but yeah, it's a state highway that runs through town. And so, you know, this would bring in some interest, some visitors. So many people drive through Paeroa anyway, getting to other areas. But this would just bring some excitement. It's, you know, it was a lot of fun. A friend of mine at the time, his mother owned Paeroa Hotel, and it was exciting to go down and watch the street race from there. And the other thing that Paeroa worked on becoming known for is to be, you know, New Zealand's little antique town. Thames is kind of it's very historical around. Hello, Vicky, how are ya? I'm just talking about Delphi murders juxtaposed against another unsolved case from a small town in New Zealand. I thought that might be interesting to look at, see how perceptions, just see how things, people's views and beliefs and things, or need to believe certain things, how it can actually sprout a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, that sort of thing, and how the threads really need to be unpicked. So I'm talking about the murder of Jordan Voudouris in Paeroa, New Zealand, 10 years ago. It's just been the 10-year anniversary, and I listened to a podcast called Guilt. I think he calls his studios BREVITY Studios. Oh, thanks for letting me know, Johnny. Hi, Ange. Hello, everyone. I'm doing this live. I'm not expecting many people to be here. I don't know what time it is anywhere. It's the morning here, and I'll be going to work in a little while. And I'm just recording this live because then it's uploaded straight away. So, you know, unsolved crime, sorry. Jordan Voudouris, this 55-year-old Greek man, slain outside his pizza shop, actually at the rear of his pizza shop, but I'm going to explain that. But anyway, I was giving a little background about Paeroa and a community there, and they've been, you know, building up their town to be known as a antiques destination. And, you know, people's ideas of antiques differ, don't they? But there would be some more knick-knacky shops, but some very decent antique dealerships. And recently, at the time of Jordan's murder, the town had actually just won this award called, you know, an award for just best town. You know, the best town. That won might have been some sort of Chamber of Commerce competition around. I don't know who. I should have maybe looked up more about this, but I thought the important. Sorry, I'm speaking in a very strange voice. I thought the important thing about that was, you know, they've got a lot to lose. They're trying not to atrophy and then die. These small towns, they have to strive really hard to stay alive. Okay, it's 8:30 in Virginia. Love the southern accent, Vicky. Are you from Virginia originally? So, okay, so I thought, because there's just so much fodder, there's so much information, I'll just tell you that the podcast that is excellent to listen to that I've just finished listening to is Ryan Wolf's Brevity Productions podcast called Guilt. It's his first season. It's all about Jordan and his murder, the people of Paeroa, Ruma, etc., and him really going through and trying to stitch together some things and untangle others. And it's very compelling. You can find it on Google Play. There are some episodes he's uploaded to Ryan Wolf on YouTube here. I think the first 4 episodes. So, I'm not going to try and be Bailey Saarinen or someone and, tell this whole story from start to finish. What I want to do is give you a bit of the information. If you're very curious, you can please go and watch this amazing cold case podcast so that you know what to think. But what I wanted to do was discuss some of the themes and show you, well, what can you see that what's happening here is, how could this have happened in Delphi? How has this situation transposed to Delphi? And, what people think they know, what they share around, because what's so interesting about what Ryan Wolf, who's a lawyer by trade, he doesn't consider himself a journalist or an investigative journalist. He's a lawyer who I think works maybe in TV production, maybe as an actor, or I'm not sure. But he just gets interested in this case for his production company, and he just starts it. He just goes off and starts interviewing. It's given me a lot of encouragement because there's a forensic criminologist that I want to go and interview here in Brisbane with regards to Delphi case and with regards to her specific knowledge about staged murders. And I want to know if she's even heard of Delphi, introduce her to it and see if she would want to give some thoughts on it. But anywho, I don't want to digress too much. So 18th of June, 2012, Jordan Voudouris, he was born in Greek. Hi, Tori. Hi, Tor. How are you? Oh, gosh, I'm just thinking, should I have put some foundation on? I've thrown colour on my face, but, try and put some life into this dear old thing. But anyway, AO, hello from Vegas. Hello, Nevada. So Jordan was born in Greece, and he had become an orphan at an early age, and he has older brothers, I think Nico and Christos, and when their mother, who was their sole carer, when their mother died of leukemia, when the boys were young, they went into an orphanage. They look on the bright side of this, it was quite cloistered. They were, everything was contained within this orphanage. So they were kind of a little bit shaded as well from the world. And they received their education there. They slept there. They played there. But, Jordan, all the boys have had this entrepreneurial streak all along, right? And this gumption. And Jordan would go out onto the streets at 7 or 8, and he would, sort of wheel and deal. He would trade things maybe to tourists and things to make some money. His brothers were that much older than him, so they were independent well before he was, and they've come to Australia. They went to New Zealand and settled in Auckland, and Jordan followed, and he's always loved the small towns of New Zealand, and he's travelled up and down, particularly the North Island, but just really loving the small towns of New Zealand, and they really are something special. And I'm from there. I have family who are in all these places that have something to do with this case, from a port town we'll talk about later, which sort of to Paeroa, which is where Nick and Christos have a shop now. They've always run restaurants. They have a pizza shop there. It's warm and cozy. But at the time that Jordan goes to Paeroa to live and to open a business, the brothers were working in a place called Devonport. It's on the north side of Auckland. So Auckland is a harbour as well. We have a harbour bridge there. Devonport's just over the harbour bridge, and it's beautiful, historic, lots of timber, sort of villa-style homes, quaint shops, lots of famous things, pubs, landmarks like military headlands and things like that. And so quite touristy, as well as somewhere that locals really love and enjoy. And, you know, I guess the equivalent would be Neutral Bay in Sydney. So Jordan has broken up with his wife that he'd had for a few years. He had a stepdaughter with her, and also 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, I believe, who are just all into adulthood now, either, you know, maybe 20s, and I think a son that's just turned sort of 18, 19. Something mysterious about Jordan, but I may as well tell you this now. He'd also in between had a wife from Asia. No one knows much about her, and apparently that was a very volatile relationship, and she went back to her homeland. No one's quite sure which country. Could find out, I guess. But the podcast didn't know, Ryan didn't know. But that came out at the very end of the podcast. Thing is, too, I don't want to ruin the podcast for you, but my telling it isn't going to ruin the story and listening to it. There's so much content. It's so well written and spoken, and the interviews are fascinating. I know you'll love listening to these New Zealand voices. These are some of them hard cases. They're quirky, they're eccentric, they're a little bit edgy and dangerous, you know. It's interesting. So Jordan, I guess, is wanting to leave Auckland and have a bit of a fresh start. He's always small towns. He heads down to Paeroa and he opens a pizza shop, and he has pizza and pasta. He calls it Mykonos, and it's right on the main drag, Belmont Street. So you've got Belmont Street going right through the centre of Paeroa. You come down the highway, you hang a right, and you're going through the main street of Paeroa, and before you know it, you're spewed out the other side, and you're on the way to Waihi through the Karangahape Gorge, you know, which is cliffs up one side, gully down the other into this beautiful crystal clear river. And then you go further out from Waihi out to Waihi Beach, which is kind of a dead end, but from Waihi you're going down to Katikati, etc., down to the Bay of Plenty, what we call BOP. So you'd get down through to Mount Maunganui, you know, which is sort of a port town, and Tauranga, which is known as a bit of a grey retirement place. Well, this place, really cool name, it's Greek. Okay, so he was making pizza, and I'm going to try and, like, all the details that I now know about, little bits and pieces, I want to save for future discussions so that we can talk about different aspects. Now I want to talk about the timeline, and at a later date I want to talk about certain bits of gossip, what the locals have said, and then that sort of thing. So I've got to be careful because, yeah. Anyway, Jordan is really well liked. He's someone that will help people out. So can you imagine there's truckies coming through all the time. There's teenagers, young kids, maybe even younger, that are just, out on the streets. They're hungry, they're hanging out. Well, where do they go? Well, they're welcome at Jordan's if they behave, but he will feed them. He's often making sure that people have extra chips to give their children. He is generous, funny, humorous, happy-go-lucky, a character, Not everyone would have known his name, but, he's spoken of as the pizza man. So he's setting his shop up really nice, right? He's a guy that likes to go on Trade Me and just buy bits and pieces, and it sounds really tchotchke, kind of, sounds really knick-knacky to me and dusty, but apparently he did it just so well with the tables and chairs he had out. It just created a real special place in this little town of Paeroa. And he loved collecting things, and he would collect hats from all over, maybe baseball cap style things, and he had a collection of different logos. People would give them to him. He'd offer to buy them, or maybe he'd buy them online, but he'd offer to buy them off people's heads if he liked it, and they were all hanging on the wall. But it sounds like a really engaging, warm, safe place where you knew you could just go and just get a good feed, as we say, get a good feed, some good kai, and he would stay open if people were still there or needed it or called him. The truckies coming through would get him on the phone, on the blower, on the phone, and phone in their orders, and then stop outside, and he'd run out their pizza and chips and things to them. And it just sounds like he just had this vibrancy, this real energy to him. And through all of the things that I've read, not just from Ryan Wolf's Guilt podcast, but through everything, you just can't find anything to say that Jordan's not a nice guy. I'll describe his little position on the street actually now, because that's really important. You've got the main drag running through town, okay? So the big LMP bottle that I was talking about is down there, down on that end of town. But you're coming through town, and on the lower side of the street, there's a block. So Belmont, Hall. This is Hall Street, this is Belmont Street. And on this corner here, there's a place called Arkwright Antiques, owned by Vivian, one of the town gossies. And then there's Jordan's shop, the pizza shop, Mykonos. Then there's Rusty's shop. Rusty, her name is Linda Rusty Hunter Bennett. She's a big player in this. She's his direct neighbor. Then there's another antique store. It's owned by a lady called Vicky, who how are we going to talk about her? Do we have to? I think we might have to. Anywho, sorry, I probably should start writing things, shouldn't I? I always just do it on the fly. I should actually write something. But, because as I've said before, I don't have a laptop or anything that's functional. I just have my phone. And, I don't have anything here just to write out. But I've got notes. Anywho, most of it's always up in here. Yeah, I've been all over the North Island, PB Kiwi. Excuse me. Oh, that LMP, it's awful. It's sweet. This is a summer edition. Maybe it's sweeter than normal. I don't know. I'm just not into that sort of drink. But anywho, but I used to love it as a kid because I didn't have it often. Yeah, I've been all over the North Island and only once to the South Island, PB Kiwi. Anywho. So, so you've got this, this little strip, starting with an antique store over here too. But there's a few little shops, and then there's Vicky's, Linda, who I'll call Rusty. That's how she's known, Rusty. Mykonos and Arkwright's. So on Hall Street here, there's a funeral director's over here. But just before that, on this side, going back behind these buildings, is an alleyway. And there's a gate here. There's an alleyway that comes out. There's a carport, which is Linda's, that Jordan used to use, maybe park his car in. And, so this is the back of the buildings, but it's very hidden away. You might look down that alley and it doesn't even look like it goes to the back of these buildings, but then it cuts in and there's the back of these shops. And at the back of the shop, Jordan also had a gate going across. He used to park his car, and then there was a gate and then some freezers at the back of his shop. So the last known time people say that they heard Jordan or something, there was this rumor going around that the night of the 17th at about 10:30 I'm so sorry. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I've just got a frog in my throat. There was rumor about, a baker delivering to Jordan, and there was an argument, but that's the last people heard of him. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But there's this time frame of 10:30. Jordan was shutting the shop then. His worker, Gareth, was leaving about that time, and Jordan's computer is, because he lived on the premises as well, his computer switches on then, and then it's switched off at 1:30 a.m. on the 18th of June 2012. Jordan used to like looking at Trade Me, which is like a buy and sell magazine, right? He used to like buying things for the shop, for family and friends, just wheeling and dealing, okay? Oh, how am I going to say this now? What timeline was circulated was that, the shop closes around 10:30. Jordan switches his computer off, not just leaves it idle, he closes it down at 1:30. About 1:30, gunshots were heard from the funeral directors at 2 a.m. Nothing was done. At 4:30, Rusty has a friend who's leaving, who stayed with her, and has said there's a body out there. Nothing is done until 6 a.m. when when we think we know that Rusty calls the police, okay? So that's a bit of a worry, isn't it? That there's these, if Rusty's friend has had to go out the back to get his car perhaps, or, he's seen a body there, why was nothing done? Is it just out of fear? It's a big lapse in time, isn't it? Now, how did Rusty come to even ring the police? Well, someone speculates it was actually Dick, her ex-husband, or her partner that she was separated from, her husband she was separated from at the time. So Linda, though, isn't the first person that Ryan Wolf interviews for his podcast. First, he goes to speak to Vivian, who has Arkwright's right on the corner of Belmont and Hall, right? And, you know, Vivian kicks it right off. Now, hey, no, now you've said that it was J Omen, separate, that's why I say J Omen, but if it's Yeoman 112 high, don't tell anybody anything. Don't give anything away. So Vivian kind of kicks it right off with, gossip, with this innuendo about who might be involved in what happened, right? And maybe the easiest thing to do might be just to read directly from some notes that I took of Ryan's podcast. So, because she introduces someone who doesn't seem to exist, right? Jordan wasn't as careful as he should have been, because Jordan was so well liked. He thought that even the tough heavies around town, that no one's going to hurt him. I don't think he's sort of taken into account accidents, desperation, out of place in, people that don't have any feel for him, right? Who think, I think he's just taken way too many risks. He seems to have been very lackadaisical with security, not locking his main gate on Hay Street, not even having a lock maybe on the gate that blocks the alleyway to his premises, just having a little hook on it, right? And he had been robbed in the past. So the way Jordan had set up his pizza shop, he probably didn't have a lot of storage in there. His shop was a little bit smaller than other people's. It sort of cut off earlier, whereas other people's were wider and went back further into the space behind. So he was probably a bit stuck for space, and he had freezers just out the back of his shop where he would store, his produce, his meat mainly. And that had been, he'd been robbed before of this, and yet he's still not locking his gates. And this was a lot of money that he's losing, plus because he always gives away food every night he's open. He's making pizza for people. He's giving children, kids, a place to sit and giving them hot chips and things like that, right? He'd had his tobacco stolen, so maybe he sold cigarettes and things like that. And people make I guess that just looking for out of town excuses too. Oh, it mustn't be just our town that's done this. It must be something Jordan was involved with, because they were quite often trying to speculate that he was involved in P. So ice, crystal meth, we call it P in New Zealand, and it's a huge problem. And of course, just like with Delphi, okay, always remember, I'm just wanting to do this in reflection with Delphi. There's meatworks around these areas, timber mills, things like that. to get through these long shifts, to make more money, to handle maybe some commutes there and back to these places from other small towns. People are taking crystal meth, right? So someone's dealing it as well. And, people would cast aspersions on Jordan that maybe he was caught up in P dealing. And Vivian, she just sounds like the town gossip to me, right? She loved having Jordan there in the shop next door because he was like her guard dog, she said, It was like having a guard dog there all the time because he worked there, he lived there, he wasn't often away, although we find out a bit more about him later, right? And she says that there was a blonde French man who would stay with Jordan, and he had been sacked that night. But then she also says the name Gareth Carey, and she tells the story about this Gareth Carey. So she says there's this young man, this French dude, this blonde dude, but Gareth is a blonde man as well. But she says that, Gareth, this guy that he brought down from Auckland, he was having trouble with the triads. And so Jordan had brought him down from Auckland to get him away from some bad influences, some bad situations, and had, tried to help him out. But it had just brought a whole lot of danger to him. And Vivian tries to say that the boy's mother, so Gareth's mother, told her that he was in the triads and he'd sold Vivian some stolen goods before the murder, and that he had been sacked that night, but they were having beers. He was having beers with his flatmates, so he had an alibi. And sorry, I'm not making this clear because I'm just trying to work out how I'm going to tell it. But so Vivian's talking about a person called Gareth, who Jordan had brought from Auckland. He was, involved with the triads. This is a Chinese gang. We have this issue in New Zealand. We have homegrown gangs there. Mongrel mob for one, and headhunters. But there's a definite triad presence in New Zealand. And so this is just from the mouth of Vivian, and she's actually saying that the mother told her, he was working, so she says Gareth was working that night, but he was sacked. But he's got an alibi because he was with his flatmate having beers. And then 6 years later, she tells the Hauraki Herald, so Hauraki Plains is where Paeroa is located. So there's a big ridge of the mountains and this huge flat, long plain. On the Hauraki Plain, that's where they do speed testing, because you've got the straight road that goes for miles, so you can race cars and things like that. So what did I say? Local paper 6 years after, Vivian's on the cover of the Hauraki Herald. She says that after she appeared in the paper, a big Māori guy wanted to talk to her. He comes into her shop, Arkwright Antiques, says, "I know who did it. It was my nephew. He's been killed 2 weeks ago. He was from Waihi, not the mongrel mob, not my son, my nephew. I don't know why she said it like that. I don't know what she said they phoned her from. I don't know why I've written phoned her from antique store. Viv wouldn't give name. I think someone must have rung her, and then this guy turns up. He was 45 to 50 years old, dressed normally, seemed friendly, and yeah, has told her, oh, it was my nephew, and he's dead, so just forget all about it. So Vivian then tells Ryan, the podcaster, about Linda, who's known as Rusty, and tells Jordan, well, Linda is the one that found, and tells Ryan, Linda is the one that found Jordan. And she rang Richard, Dick, who's her husband at the time, but they've separated. And that Dick told her to go inside. So Dick lived down in Karangahape Gorge, and it's not that far. So Vivian's pondering why the 2-hour delay. To give the cousin time to go away, maybe. If Linda knew something or suspected her cousin Barry of involvement. Yes, her friend was her cousin. And I'll tell you more about that later. So I mentioned the 2 a.m. gunshot that was heard. There is a whole furor and confusion that continues on for so long about this. And it really goes to tell you that you can't even rely on first-person testimony. Okay? Glenn Rogers was funeral director there at the time, and he was the person that attended Jordan's body. And he stated that his staff member, Stephen Roberts, was living at the funeral parlor at the time because he was working there. There's a flat out the back. A lot of these buildings, they've got these little flats at the back of the premises. And he said Stephen Roberts was working there at the time. And, the funny thing about this is Ryan also gets told that this other person called, that this completely other person is living there at the time, actually. And he talks to him. This guy is an ex-policeman. He's done a lot of different things in his life. He's quite elderly by the time Jordan talks to him, by the time Ryan talks to him. But he calls this guy up on the phone. I'm just trying to get his name because there's so many angles I could talk about here. I know they're jumping around a lot, but I'm sorry. Let me just find it. The director. Okay. But then, he keeps getting told, no, Bruce was working there, living there with his wife. So there's these stories that one funeral director was there, had some friends over and they were partying, and that's why they were up. But then people keep insisting that Bruce was there. And Ryan talks to Bruce, and Bruce goes, yeah, I wasn't partying though. And then Ryan says, but we hear that, you heard a gunshot, you reported hearing a gunshot at 2 a.m. And he goes to his wife, honey, did we hear a gunshot at 2 a.m.? She's going, no. And he's going, no, I didn't. So it's like, is this whole thing about the gunshot just bullshit? I mean, even this guy, it transpires, like, so he's talking to Ryan, oh yes, I was here, I remember walking out and looking across the street and seeing all the kerfuffle, because they had to wait for a tent to come in from another town so that they could cover Jordan up. Jordan just, I haven't explained how he was found yet, but it turns out that this guy didn't even work there at the time. He'd already left those premises to open his own funeral directorship blocks away. That's where he was at the time. Now maybe he heard something and walked around, but he thought, he was picturing in his mind that he was there when it happened. And it took a lot of unweaving to work out that Glenn Rogers was right all along. This fellow Stephen was there. He was up partying. It's so bizarre. Anyway, so I'm not doing a very good job of this, because I'm just going to let you listen to this podcast yourself anyway. I really urge you to do it. So, how Jordan was found, I should tell you that. He was found near the gate on Hay Street. He was on the ground. His arm was tangled in the lock mechanism. The keys to that gate were lying on the ground, and so was a .22 caliber shell. And he had damage to his arms. You could think of as defensive wounds. And a graze where the bullet had maybe grazed his arm, and it's gone into his body, it's gone into his chest, he's bled out. And his young staff member Tatiana has to see him like this because she arrives for work early in the morning. He's still uncovered. He's just laying there bare. Now, Linda, let's talk about Rusty, right? Because she's deeply involved in the timeline and what people think about it. But, she had a lot to hide, okay? And there's, sometimes people have things to hide that are nothing to do with the crime, but they just don't want someone knowing their business, or they're ashamed. So Vivian, the Arkwright Antiques lady, tells about Rusty. I found it interesting what Rusty's shop was called, Rusty's 22, and then I worked out it was, like a .22 caliber. Then I worked out that it was Rusty's 2211. Now, could that mean 1040? It's like a tax break thing. 2211. Like, it's the numerals, right? 2211, which would be sort of 1040. But 2211 is guardian angels are looking at you and watching you all the time. When you see 2211, this is one of these angel numbers, and it's about the guardian angel that is watching you. And why might she name a shop this? Well, she was married to a man called Richard Hunter, who's known as Dick. And yes, that is a common contraction of the name. I also know someone who is called Richard. His name's contracted to Dick. It's just normal, okay? So it's not a silly thing. Don't be puerile when I'm saying this word, please. It's a legitimate name. So Linda was married to Dick, and in the podcast, we only ever get to hear about Dick through Linda and through a man, Mr. Quinn, who hired Dick for the last sort of career job of his life. He had hired him for many years and spoke very highly of him. And he's the one that tells us that, Dick might have been a bit of a hippie thing. He had a ponytail, earrings, smoked a bit of weed maybe. and he took colloidal silver. And someone that's into colloidal silver and things like that, I mean, I think I can bet they're into, they're into angels and the like, maybe, right? So maybe that's why they called the shop Rusty's 2211, which had gotten during their marriage, but Rusty ran and kept after she separated from Dick. Sadly, we never hear from Dick because Dick dies. And, colloidal silver, it can damage your organs. It can cause seizures. It can do various things if you're overdosing. And it sounds like he was taking this for a very long time. Maybe, during COVID, because he died during COVID in 2020. I feel like maybe he got scared, started taking way too much colloidal silver. I don't know. Maybe this is why, contributed somehow. I'm not sure. But he was sick. I think actually maybe it was cancer. And it was Linda and her son who nursed Dick for the last 9 months of his life. But at the time of Jordan's murder, so she had separated from Dick. And I've got 15% battery. I better hurry up. And the person, her friend that she had with her, his name's Barry. And it's Linda's cousin. But she explains, look, we didn't grow up knowing each other, and we kind of she had an attraction for him, right? And there is this, there is a thing called familial genetic sexual attraction, right? It's a thing. She swears that they didn't consummate anything that night or anything, but he'd come down into Paeroa to drive her around in his new V8 or something like that, and then he'd had to scarper really easily. Heidi had to scarper really early, at 4:30 in the morning, because he's got to go off to work. Either it was the meat works or, one of the local mills or something around there, right? So he had to leave early. And maybe he wanted to leave, or maybe Rusty thought he should leave before anyone, saw him, right? Because it's her cousin, but also it's very clear that Linda doesn't want Richard to know that she's seeing anyone. Maybe, there could be a lot of shame, there could be a lot of guilt, and there's all sorts of complications there, just, human stuff. So she's trying to explain to Ryan about, because he's trying to ask, would you leave out the front door, the back door? Linda is a woman that has a lot to hide, but so she confabulates a lot and that sort of thing. But it seems like this guy would have had to have gone out the back, because he's probably parked this V8 car out the back, right? And we know the gate's not locked. I mean, I don't know. Has he gone out the back just to go out to Hall Street? Because what did he do? Drive over Jordan, who's lying in that alleyway? This is the bit that has always remained quite unclear, actually. But apparently, Linda goes out the front. Barry's gone out the back, but Linda goes out the front. She goes out the front to, wave Barry off. She's gotten up because she's thought, well, maybe I'll go to Dick's to do my laundry. So, there's probably no facilities to speak of at the back of the shop. Maybe it's a very simple setup of having somewhere to sleep and maybe a kitchenette, and that's where she's staying because she's separated from her husband. People have noticed that she's not staying in the gorge anymore and that she's down in the shop, and she's very touchy about this, and in fact it causes a rift between her and Vivian, because Vivian just asks her and Linda just goes bananas at her, and Vivian kind of feels like she's a different type of person to Linda as it is, right? Linda is known as someone very quirky, very outrageous, maybe too bold and brassy for Paeroa, who knows, right? She wears leopard skin tights and probably big hair and all of this stuff, right? Big deal. But she likes that look, but she's always describing herself as very old-fashioned, very, very old-fashioned lady. I think she's a little bit frightened by life, and I think she was like a ship without an anchor, without a port in a storm, without Dick. And I think Dick, it broke her heart not to be with him. She loved him for the rest of her life, and she cared for him in his dying months and was the one that nursed him, gave his medication, made him comfortable, etc. Apparently when Dick's other children, found out that she was there nursing him, they came down and just sat in the house looking out for any phone calls from insurance agencies and lawyers and the like, because they didn't want Linda getting any grubby hands on his stuff, maybe. These sort of twisted family dramas that happen, right? But she's gone out to wave Barry goodbye, wave Barry away, the Barry that she doesn't want Dick to know anything about, right? And he has stopped the car and he said, Linda, there's a body out there. Now she says she's had a little look and it's looked like some child lying out there. It was, he must have looked so pathetic. I mean, he wasn't a big man, right? Jordan, he was a lean, fine-boned man, just this, he would look so at home. You can see him romanticized nearly on a wooden fishing boat in the Aegean Sea, just hardened by the work and browned by the sun, although I imagine he spent the majority of his time indoors and slaving over hot ovens and stoves, and maybe was appearing to be fit and to have stamina, but probably wasn't as healthy as people thought, because there's no way he could be with his lifestyle, really. So what does Linda decide to do? Well, I mean, why don't Barry and Linda call 000? Why don't they raise the alarm right then and then? This is just truly bizarre. But, was Linda really freaked out? Did she think, is someone going to come after me? Am I safe? Did she just barricade herself away in the home? I don't know. It's very strange. But she gets up, she goes and she's talking to her husband, Dick. And it's uncertain who actually calls emergency. Was it Linda, Rusty, or was it Dick? But the call goes in at 6 o'clock. But the thing with the timeline is, okay, so this is where I wanted to, just talk about these timeline points. There's talk about a baker at 10:30 making deliveries. Well, I've worked in food service. I've worked running cafes and things, and, a million years ago in hospitality, but our bakery deliveries were early in the morning. After it's been baked, it just gets delivered very early in the morning before you wake up, maybe 5 or 6, before you open up. Also, Jordan didn't sell other people's produce like that. They made everything in store. Tatiana, who is a young woman, who's only probably 20, she's about 27 now, So, all this talk about Baker, people are saying, well, was it someone called Baker, or was it someone delivering to another business down the street? But for years, and at the time, it's so certain, no, he had an argument with the baker outside his store at 10:30. Oh, Linda's saying, oh, he had an argument with Gareth, and that would have been the argument at 10:30. And Gareth remains a man of mystery through most of this podcast, right? But, it turns out what is this 10:30 business? Was it just a sighting of him locking up his shop from someone down the street? Was there any argument at all? Because it's not founded in fact. He wasn't getting bakery deliveries. That just didn't happen. People speculate then, was it someone named Baker? It's just a big mess. So he shuts his computer down at 1:30. Now, that timeline, the earlier timeline than a 2 a.m. gunshot being heard by a funeral director who's telling you that he was there, but he wasn't actually in those premises. He hadn't been for months, and this is first-person testimony. So you clearly can't trust it. He's an older guy now, but even at the time he might have been old, but he's believing that he was there. He must have been there. He hasn't even put it together that he wasn't even there in the premises across the road on Hall Street. It wasn't him that was there. It wasn't him that supposedly heard this 2 a.m. gunshot, but he doesn't even know it, sort of thing, right? Eventually Ryan Wolf does track down the person who was there. And yeah, the owner of the funeral director place was right all along. But what I wanted to say now was the earlier time of 1:30 is really interesting because it brings us into testimony of a really, just this huge character. Let's call her Sierra. And she is convinced over and over again. She has told the story to everyone who will listen, probably from news sources, townsfolk, friends. She's told a story, her testimony of hearing an argument. She didn't hear a gunshot, but she heard an argument between a man, a Greek accent, being Jordan, and a woman, a Pacific Islander accent. And she will tell you she knows who this is as well. And she will tell you that this person killed Jordan Voudouris. So what is it about her testimony that really stinks? Well, I'm just going to tell you that. Let me just check something. A bit of time. So, Sierra, we're told about Sierra by Vivian because Sierra is a friend of a person that works in Vivian's Arkwright Antique shop who goes in quite regularly. Sierra is a trans woman. I'd say there's not been a lot of transition happening there hormonally or anything like that, but who has lived in Paeroa for 4 decades, has come down from Auckland. She used to be a performer. She says, because of my skill, in lip syncing and miming and mannerisms, etc., I have a very good ear. I know exactly who, I'm never wrong. And she's just the biggest gossip. When she's telling her story to Jordan, and this is quite a ways through the podcast, so you're hearing all about her, testimony. Vivian says, Sierra, she rattles everybody's cages. She's very opinionated. And yeah, it's true. She is convinced of her time frame because she swears that she was just waiting to watch a movie that was about to start at 1:20, and so it was 1:15 when she hears, she says, movie's about to start. It was a man and woman. They were fighting. They fought for about 40 seconds. She go around to look, but she didn't take her German Shepherd because she's worried about rangers. The German Shepherd was a bit nasty. She had a lot of dogs. She has this black pit bull that Jordan really loved. He used to feed it olives. I wondered later, is that why they actually the police called the investigation Operation Olive, not just of Mykonos, but something to do with this, I don't know, this dog, this time frame, I don't know. And Sierra, she goes around in the morning, she's telling the constable, look, I know something about this. She says the constable was more interested in eyeing up the 17-year-old in the pink hot pants. She says, I handed so later I got loaded and I went and handed myself in, and they talked to me for 5 hours. It must have been an awful interview for the police. But she wanted to tell her testimony of waiting for the movie, something about Blade. And Ryan says, Blade Runner? She goes, no, Blade with, Wesley Snipes. And she goes, yes, that was it. So this starts this big search for Ryan to get hold of like a TV guide, anything from the era. And the TV stations didn't keep that sort of record of the programming. They kept archives of the programs, but not the record of the programming. But he eventually finds something out, right? So Sierra is convinced that who she hears at 1:15 is a security guard a Pacific Islander lady. This is a different accent again. There is a difference in if they've got an accent, it's different to Māori or anything like that, okay? She's a security guard. So, towns, they have people that go around, they just do the rounds, they check businesses and everything, right? And apparently she was supposed to be off sick that night and someone else was working, but I heard her, says Sierra. And Sierra says that it was Sophia, it's just a pseudonym, was the one stealing from his fridges, and Jordan wanted to catch her. And so she's cruising the streets, and Sierra says she met up with Sophia 14 months later. And she says that the cops are in complete denial. They threatened Sierra. They asked about Sierra's drug habit, Jordan's drug habits. That's where she says, no, he's a happy-go-lucky guy who was accepted so quickly. The security woman was stealing his meat, selling it to buy drugs, and she had knowledge of the CCTVs, and she used a 22 caliber pistol. She says pistol. Jordan was shot with a rifle. She used a 22 caliber pistol whilst on patrol, right? She reckons the police just don't want to solve it because why spend money on why spend our money on an international crime? Why bother? Yeah, she says she's a very angry person. She's been threatened 3 times in the last 10 years because of what she says about the murders. She's been accused of disturbing the peace and all sorts of things by the police. And Ryan describes her as, someone with deep resentment. She's like a kettle boiling, switched in the jammed on position. Yeah. But, Sierra, as Joman just says, she writes on her wall, that, she knows who did it was the woman, and that she's got away with it, sort of thing, The thing about this, right? Okay, so if it's the security guard lady, if she was, someone was stealing from Jordan, and someone like that would know about the rear alley, because it's quite funny, because people say you either knew or you didn't know about the rear alley. Well, guess who knew about the rear alley? Vivian from Arkwright's often had to send people around the back to find Linda, because she didn't always have her front door open. She wasn't always open, but she'd be there, and Vivian would have to send people around the back. Strangers, people, were being directed around the back all the time, according to Vivian, to find Linda. So going down Hall Street, down the alley between, the back of these buildings, past Vivian's, past Jordan's, to Linda's. Security guard would know about CCTV, but it's only just been released that a vehicle, an SUV, was seen going past at 109 and then 121. Now that time frame is interesting, particularly if Jordan's closed off his computer and gone down at 1:30. Why? Did he hear a noise? Did he hear a rattle of his gate? Someone trying to get into his freezers again? There's something else about that too, because there's another lady that actually has something to, Vicky. There's a Vicky who is next to Linda's shop. Sorry, she's got the brick building. Vicky doesn't think that she would have heard anything at all, only if she'd maybe, got up to go to the loo. Everyone's saying how soundproofed their buildings are and things, and they're probably very scared. Why did Sierra hear? Well, at this alleyway, her old ramshackle place backs up to the alleyway from another direction, and she was in her little sitting room there, probably only 88 feet away. She says 50, but Ryan works it out to be 88 feet away. She possibly could have heard an argument. Sorry, let me just think. That's right. So what Linda said she saw to Vivian, she actually said, she just saw some legs. But it's so weird. It's so awful, because at one point she said it would look maybe like a little child. Why would you not call? And then she tries to say, she just thought it was some local Māori fella who's probably passed out drunk. The lack of, is she just not involved just because, don't want to get involved, don't want to help anybody, or because it is all about the shame of, Barry's her cousin. Dick, her husband at the time, was saying, Barry, he's done you a really disservice. He's left you in it. He's left you in a very vulnerable position. He shouldn't have put you in that position. He should have just called. He shouldn't have just run off. I don't know. So has she ummed and ahed? The police will know, right, how long she talked to Dick for on the phone. Was it a brief call just before 6 o'clock? Anyway, this has gotten really, really scatty and rambly. But, you know, it's just that there's so many things about the timeline. What happens with Sierra and her timeline is that movie was another one, and it was actually due to start at 12:30. There was the making of Blade Runner was on TV. So is her memory just warped? Well, she says that she was telling the story right from the very beginning. But does she just have some grudge against this Pacific Island lady? You know, she's a very bitter, twisted person, this Sierra, by accounts. And, you know, you really just don't know what level of stability, right, people are coming from. We just assume that everyone's sane and stable and they've got good processing, right? And if they say that they heard something at 1:15 and they're cocksure, well, we throw it on our timeline. But Sierra's reasoning for the time is completely askew. Completely askew. That program wasn't on. The closest thing was the making of Blade Runner, and it was on starting at a much earlier time, going for 2 hours, going from 12:30 to 2:30. We're told the person that heard the gunshot wasn't even there, that it was someone else, and then when he's spoken to, he doesn't even realize that he wasn't even there. He thinks he was. He thinks he was at the funeral directors on Hall Street. Oh, it must have been, sort of thing, right? So people would take that as first person testimony. But he wasn't even there. But he remembers going out and walking across the street. Well, he probably did. Maybe he walked a few blocks, right? So that, you know, that's really messed up. And this is supposed to be first person testimony. We've got Tatiana, the young girl who was 16 and a half at a time, who had started working with Jordan actually many years before, when she was quite young, because her mum worked there and then she started working there, and she looked up to Jordan immensely as a father. So she probably felt quite protective. She's a young girl. She was maybe sensitive to things. She probably didn't understand that chefs are passionate, argumentative at times. It's stressful. It's one of the most stressful jobs. A lot of chefs might drink too much or whatever. And, you know, she remembers Gareth having this huge argument with Jordan, and she was sure that he was fired. So in her testimony, with her, you know, timeline of that night, there's another person having an argument with Jordan. Apparently this really happy-go-lucky, well-loved person was having arguments left, right, and center at all various times of night, firing people, people that are apparently caught up with the triads, etc. So there's always, you know, what am I trying to say? Right. Yeah, and I mean, the person that doesn't even realize for so, oh, I wasn't actually there. Yeah, that's right. Until he's reminded, you'd already bought another funeral director business. You were already running a business several streets away. He used to be an ex-detective sergeant. So we really have to be careful about what weight we put on people's testimony. Because in Delphi, for example, you've got people like, yes, I'll name names, Julie Melvin, troll extraordinaire, in everybody's ear. She is on Robert Lindsay's site feeding him piffle. Marvin Frank, I'd say, I'd take a good stab in the dark at that, feeding them piffle, right? People are dangerous when they think they have a certain intellect. They're not bright enough to know they're not bright enough. Okay, it's this Dunning-Kruger effect, or the Dunning-Kruger effect, I like to call it when we're talking in relation to true crime. and it's dangerous, it's devastating, it's destructive, it's diversionary, it's all of these things, okay? It should stop, This is the JM that, I will allege was Zhao's contacts on the ground right there in Delphi. Who she didn't know anything more than what was in the paper or what she guessed, or, she knew a few names and she'd say, yes, I can believe that would be the case. Nick McClelland, this, and this. Oh, complete trash as far as, having any reasonable testimony about a murder, okay? And yet it's taken as this fact and it's put into the people's timelines, right? So, the small town correlation, it's exactly the same. You've got, these business owners desperately trying to hold on to the status of the town that they've just acquired of, being the best small town in New Zealand, right? Getting some award, maybe just this Chamber of Commerce award or something, I don't know. But, they're really trying hard to improve their lot and be on the map for something. They've got to survive, just like Delphi is trying to survive with its trail system and its history, keeping the history of the early settlers and the industry that was there, and just trying to beautify their town, trying to just make it somewhere worth being and living, let alone, and then, by being somewhere worth visiting. And it is so beautiful when actually people do visit. They come into this area of Indiana for holidays. They bring their RVs, they go camping, they kayak on the Deer Creek, Sugar Creek, the Wabash Canal systems, all of these river systems through Carroll County, Indiana. They come there, they walk on the trails, they go to the History Museum, they want to go and look at all these places. The archaeologically, we know it's very important and interesting. And this is the same with Paeroa. Okay, now Paeroa, there's a lot of mining history around in the gorge. It's the gateway to beautiful beaches, up toward the Coromandel Peninsula. Just imagine, New Zealand's Christmas tree, the Pahutukawa tree, big gnarly trees. It's like our version of the Moreton Bay fig, although it's much more beautiful. And the olive coloured leaves, and these bright crimson blossoms, and they hang all over the cliffs, hanging out into the sea, and all these little hidden rocky and sandy bays. There is a bay called Sandy Bay in the Coromandel, and hot water beach, where you go and dig in the sand and the hot water bubbles up. You're right on the ocean. Places, where you can, just people have their batches, their holiday homes, and go out there all times of year. And certain times of year it might be misty and wet, and you're wearing old jumpers and playing cards and drinking whiskey at night and fishing during the day, going for hikes, digging up shellfish, and all amongst all of this transient crowd of holiday makers and just getaway enjoyers, the people that are actually trying, eking out their livings there, or maybe they've retired there, or they're just hiding there, but there's a whole lot of characters, and it's probably, similar to Delphi. There are people that have, got history with the land there, who have been involved for generations through all the industries growing up, cropping up in the mills, in the abattoirs, in the mining industry, and they're established there as farmers, as market gardeners, etc. And there's new people coming in and wanting to have somewhere to settle and make a new life, and that, which was Jordon, right? And the brutal slaying of two girls, Abby and Libby, reflecting in this brutal slaying of, on the trail system. on the very thing that is supposed to elevate the town, keep the town alive, be a lifeblood, of the town. Same with Paeroa and Jordan being slain right there behind his shop on the main drag, a shop that was such a heart of the town, so important to the town, as an important stop for workers coming through, but just a town trying to be an actual pit stop, a stop in itself, special for its antiques district style, and maybe for the restaurants and for people like Jordan and the pubs and the things like that. I tell you what, though, Paeroa pub, and pubs in these parts, right, Matamata and Frankston, all of these parts, you walk in, they know instantly you're an outsider, that you don't belong, and you will have some people they'll be sitting at the bar in the middle of the day. You'll walk in, it'll be kind of shadowy, and then your eyes will sort of adjust, and you're so aware of the noise you're making, creak, on the old timber floorboards of some 100-year-old bar, timber, 2-storied, saloon style or tavern style pub, or the stone brick, and they will swivel their heads and just stare at you, hunched over in their boots and their cow splattered clothing and their ruddy faces and everything, and you will be, you feel like you are burly thrown into the sea. I don't know, it's probably something that the townspeople, the business owners, were trying to develop out of. Locals get resentful for that sort of thing. I wonder what Sierra was really resentful for, right? With Jordan, with the robberies that were happening to him, eventually Ryan gets hold of Gareth, and he has some interesting things to say about that, and we'll talk about that next time, and that sheds light on who really might have done it. And I think it's a good possibility, if it were anything to do with this Pacific Island security guard, well, surely then the police would have just wrapped this up. So maybe, she's, Sierra, it comes to light that she's so wrong about so many things, and she's, probably got a screw loose, just in the way that people can. Their lives drive them mad, their own lives, they drive themselves mad, their history drives them mad. She is a very bitter person. And it's interesting. So Gareth is found, and he talks to Ryan, and he tells him what the truth is about triad gangs and all of that sort of thing, right? But those robberies of Jordan's shop, Mykonos, they weren't the only ones. And that very night, well, that morning of the 18th, there were a series of armed robberies from Waihi. So that's a town you drive through Karankahape Gorge. A local would probably drive it in 14-15 minutes. It'd probably take others who don't know the road 25 or something. It's perilous, it's windy, it's beautiful. There were armed robberies sort of 5 a.m. in the morning in Waihi at a petrol station, and then further down, and then at Caddy Cat at a kind of like, I think at this sort of, I don't know, maybe this store that sells petrol and sells all sorts of things. And this is, this was like Monday morning, so Sunday night. So is this armed robbers who are trying to take advantage of. Oh yeah, and she's told that story so many times, Yeoman. She's just, yeah, she's got her way of telling it. She's got her things. She's not even stopping to really analyze herself, right? She's just got her story and she's telling it, and that's the one she's sticking to. She gets a kick out of it. She doesn't understand the damage that she might be doing. She's just convinced in her own mind, and that's that, she thinks, and the police are corrupt and they just don't want it solved because it maybe involves drugs and triads, or because it's got a Greek and a Pacific Islander. I mean, anywho, what the fuck was I saying? I wanted to say, saying about Gareth, and we find out about him, but then I wanted to say something else. Yeah, about these robberies, right? These were some, young yahoos. It was young people selling. Something that Gareth reveals is Jordan was buying fish from these young guys, and undersized snapper. Now in New Zealand, in Australia, in New Zealand, probably everywhere around the world, there are rules and regulations about, from the fisheries department, about what you can take, how many shellfish you can take from a beach, how many fish you can catch, what size they are. So for example, if you go out in a boat and you want to dive down and get some scallops, well, often what will happen is, the kids will go along as well, because it's per head, how many people in the boat, or how many people fishing. It's how many fish you can take, how many shellfish you can take. So pippies, mussels, tuatuas, oysters, cockles, etc., right? And people overfish all the time. And, certain races, there's a lot of resentment towards certain races in New Zealand too, because it's often certain people that you see that are appear to be raping the beaches for way too much without a care, and it's done, in the name of sustainability, so that it just there's enough that remains for everyone into the future and for the environment. But Gareth is warning Jordan not to buy this undersized fish, because he will get fined. He could get jail for that. These tiny little fillets, right? A snapper needs to be, you can't take this small fish. You've got to throw it back and just get the decent sized fish. And you can tell, even if it's been filleted, well, what size fish it's come from. And Jordan was buying filleted fish already. Gareth knew it was too small. He warned him over and over again. And Gareth thought maybe that these boys were stealing from Jordan, because that they're around there at the back. They know about his freezers. He knows about the meat freezers and that sort of thing, right? So I don't know, but I think that's a good possibility. And I also think, what about these boys that were committing armed robberies? But the other thing is, there's a lot to talk about with Linda as well, with Rusty, and the things that she says, okay? And we can talk about that another time too, and I'll just chat about Gareth. But I'm not really making my points clear, I don't think, because I haven't done this very well, but I just wanted to tell you about Jordan's murder. It's a heinous, vicious murder. Seems so senseless. He died with his wristwatch still on him, with money in his wallet. We'll talk about all the allegations. We'll talk about the gossipy things next time, okay? Just wanted to give you a bit of the structure, basic of what happened, and just have you thinking about these small towns, these heinous things that happen out of the blue, how people might feel threatened by it. You don't want it to be a local, as long as it's not a local. But if it might be someone from out of town that had, ties to gangs, right? But there's a few things I want to talk about with regards to what Jordan was up to, and things like that. But, it's so funny. Everyone is saying throughout this entire podcast sort of thing that you wouldn't know about this alleyway. How could you? It was so private. And sure. But then Vivian, when she's talking again about, when she's talking about Rusty and her relationship and how they sort of tried to tolerate each other for a while, she takes Rusty's parcels because Rusty's often not open. She's not open at the front. And so people come into her looking for her. People are calling in looking for her. She says, go around and get the phone number. Or sometimes she actually said she directs people around to the back. People knew about the back, and anyone skulking around. I mean, sure, people who are patrolling as security guards for an area, they would know about the back. Because the funeral directors, all of these businesses would pay a company to have someone come in and do the rounds, okay, a couple of times. I've had it, when I worked in, various businesses, right? You have, and they leave the little ticket to show that they made their call that night, right? You pay for the service. It's so that they can come in, they have a look with their torch, they check that no one's around, and it's supposed to be a deterrent as well as, anything else. So, whoever's in that company, they know all the spots, right? They might know that Jordan doesn't lock anything up, but, how much lack of faith in police are we supposed to have that, okay, if it's anything to do with the security firm, that they can't work it out? I mean, they're really, think about this, think about, we talk all the time with Delphi about what's being withheld from us. Well, police have only just released information about the SUV. They've got footage of this grayish or silver SUV. It's like a Nissan or some sort of, like a Prado or some sort of Nissan four-wheel drive, driving 109 and 121, seen on the main drag. That is suspicious. And did they withhold it because they didn't want someone to know that they were seen, so that that person wouldn't sell the vehicle or change the vehicle? We can question, like, God, if only they had just said, they could have found that person. It could have been perfectly innocent, or, maybe if it wasn't innocent, if they had just shown everyone that, someone would have said, oh, I didn't know where my husband Tom was, and that's his car, whatever, right? Maybe someone would have realized that they were an alibi for someone who wasn't where they said they were, and maybe they would have come forward. We can't make these calls as, we can think we make these calls as civilians. That was wrong, if only they'd come forward. But maybe there are other reasons why they don't. And maybe it's because police understand that as soon as someone realizes they are looking for a vehicle, the vehicle is sold, trashed, changed, buried, whatever, right? Maybe because they hoped that they could just find that car, recognize it, connect it to someone that might be connected to Jordan, and go from there. It's so hard to judge, but we do judge. We judge every aspect, and we just base it on things that just we conjure up in our own minds, some things that just spontaneously erupt into our imagination and then come out our mouths or onto the page, So there's people believing so many things about the timeline and spreading it around, right? So people think it's fact. People what's the word? Misidentified as being quite key. People who for a long time that no one knew about because someone didn't want anyone to know. So for a long time, for years and years, people didn't know that Linda had someone there and that she had known about it at 4:30. Didn't go out to see. I don't want to think of him. Imagine this 55-year-old man. It's midwinter. I can tell you how cold it gets in the heartland of North Island, New Zealand. It's icy. We get frost that is thick, and it's freezing, below zero. I don't know what the temperature was then, but it would have been so cold. He's lying just out on some, on gravel, on, just this driveway, alone, reaching up to the gate that he was, trying to lock. The blood trail, it's very strange though. He had the keys and maybe he was going out at 1:30 to lock this gate. And he's interrupted going out his back door because there was a blood trail going down to him where he had tried to reach his gate, maybe to open it and get out onto Hall Street and raise the alarm. Or was he trying to chase people out after being shot, and then he's just succumbed meters away from his back door and just off the road, and Rusty has known he's there, and she has not gone to offer aid, nor did this guy Barry. Why did he have, is he such a hard ass that he thought, well, he's going to be fingered for it? Well, stop and think. Well, do you have gunpowder on your hand? Are you holding a weapon? What? Did he just not, was it shame? Was it such the shame of being cousins, sexually involved, wanting to be? How is that enough excuse to let somebody lay alone like that? And so, to call the police only at 6 o'clock. Maybe they could have saved him. Who knows? It's so sad. But yeah, I'm not doing a very good job of this, but, I just want you to think of these small town things. Just think of because maybe if you can look at a different case, if you go and listen to this podcast, if you get involved in this different case, you've got some distance, some perspective. Will it then allow you to transfer that over to how you feel about Delphi and how you filter and how you translate, how you understand, or how you analyze what's being said? And, will it make you more thoughtful about what you take on board, what you believe is fact, who you believe, and maybe stop and think and give consideration to everything a little bit more, because there's so much that comes out that was just taken as fact. And we know that first-hand testimony is wrong. Okay, it can be proven to be wrong, misunderstanding. We don't know that Sarah, she said she got stupidly loaded before going and handing myself into the police. She's so dramatic, right? Well, she's getting loaded. How loaded was she the night of the 17th into the 18th? To think that she knew the time. I think she's just got it into her head and she doesn't want to let it go. She can't, right? She's just doubling down on it all. And now she's just feeling like some sort of advocate or crusader, and it's taken over her life, this idea of knowing who it is, and yet the police are doing nothing. So hopefully someone, if anyone ends up watching this live, other than who's been here, thank you everyone who's popped in. Hopefully people will go and listen to Ryan Wolf's Brevity Productions podcast called Guilt, Season 1. You can find it on Google Play. You can start off on YouTube and watch the first 4 episodes, listen to them, and then go and listen to the rest on Google Play. Just look up what I've just said. You'll find it. And then we can have further discussions, because I want to talk more about, just some of the gossip that some of the things that Vivian and, Rusty, Tatiana, all the things that people have said and the stories they've told. Are they right or wrong? How misguided are they? The things that are told about Gareth are really intense things, and he has been really blamed. And that's right, Yeoman. It's interesting that Sierra's testimony about when the argument took place is actually 15 minutes prior to the computer being shut down. I mean, I've pondered, okay, was it someone that he was communicating with on his computer? Has he agreed to meet them? Is it something to do with Trade Me? Is that why he's actually shut? But he's, shut it down as if to go to sleep, as if to go to bed, as if to go and lock up. If he just heard something downstairs, would he have just left his computer on, right? And it would have just gone into sleep. But he's actually closed it off. And he's got his keys. So, he's gone down. And it just seems like he was going down to shut his gate. But, the idea is, was someone waiting for him? Did he catch someone in the act? Was it just really bad luck that he was still awake? But why would they creep around there and go in if, he's still up? It's not really quite late enough, is it? At 1:30 or so, if, Jordan has still got a light on or something, So has he gone out, were they there waiting for him specifically? Who might that be? What was he really involved in, if anything, right? This very nice person, this very generous person, who seems to just want to, be loyal, help people, but had this kind of delusion about the world, right? And that, because he was so well loved, he thought he could handle anything and everything, and that, but that doesn't account, that does, should not be lax with security, and he was being very lax. He should have been shutting up at 10:30, and then, he should have been doing this. He and Linda had a key to the gate. Now, Linda hasn't shut the gate, so makes me think, well, because she knew Barry was going to be going out the back, right? There's a lot of shame with Linda and that, but, people will judge her differently when you're listening to the podcast. But yeah, he could have been ambushed. It could have been, or he could have just surprised them, and it didn't go and as planned. Clearly they didn't expect to see him, and there was a scuffle, and this is why they've gone off without stopping to take anything. They've been concerned that gunshots going to be heard and that they're going to be caught, so they've just had to scarper. Or was it someone, there purposely waiting for him? Is that why the timing was just so bad? Because, they were there waiting. But, there's people that are so convinced about a timeline or about who was around, who heard what when, and they're absolutely wrong. Yet it's in folklore, it's talked about, it's written about, people talk about it as if it's fact. And this is happening in Delphi too. And when we talk about motive, we not only need to think about the motive of the murderer, right? We want to know why Jordan's killed. We want to know why the girls were killed. And, we worry about corruption, about things. I will bring up one other thing too, just quickly. But, we want to know motive. And motive, of course, is not only something to do with the murder, but motive is something to do with why people act the way they do. And what does it show? Guilt, or just guilty conscience, or just what are they hiding? It can have nothing to do with the crime. It's their own personal thing. It's their own life. There's so many variables. There's so much, complication when there's so many human lives involved. Human lives are complicated, and everybody's got their own story. Everybody is the center of their own universe, and this is a lot to do with why people say the things they do, believe the things they do, and it really clouds the truth. So you have to be very cautious just to base things on actual fact, and often you're not really getting much actual fact from the mouths of law enforcement, and sometimes they are even making you feel crazy because you think they've said one thing in one press conference or interview, about a night in question and the series of events, and then you think there's another, and then there's another official statement, and it's so fucked up. It is a clusterfuck. It is confusing, right? But we've got to be careful about what we go on, because there's not only the motive of the perpetrator, whether it's an accident or whatever, there's the motives of everybody else involved and what story they tell. Quite a few people, because I will talk about this as well in the next, we'll have one more talk about this, because I want to talk about how the police investigation, some of the things that they have done. I wanted to say something in Delphi. It's to do with Flora Fire, and Flora Fire killed Kiana, Kiralee, Kiara, and Keone. This happened in November 2016. Anyway, police put out a reward, okay? A reward for $5,000. Now, that is a piffling amount, right? But, people are up in arms that it's been removed, it's been taken off the table, and it's been gifted to the Flora Fire Station to use. This is not unusual. Rewards aren't there just to be, sometimes they're private rewards that are brought in, or, from GoFundMes or all different organizations. But these legal law enforcement based rewards, they're not supposed to be. They are to get information, get it quick. They want someone to come forward with the right information quickly. It's not just an ongoing thing, just when you get around to it, just when you feel like you might, just when you get the guts. By the time, so that meantime they can spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on the case and waste everybody's time and, take resources away from other cases. No, rewards are there, and they're usually there for a time period, and that's that. They're not open-ended, they are there to maybe be the catalyst for someone who's keeping quiet, who shouldn't be keeping quiet. Maybe just appeal to their greed or need, right? If it's not going to be by good nature, i.e. rusty, etc., right? The reward, $50,000 for information about Jordan, it was put out onto the table by law enforcement in New Zealand, and then it was withdrawn exactly a year later. Okay? Because, you've had your chance. They want to solve this crime. They need the information quickly. They need to be able to act on something and follow through while things are fresh. And, and while people are around, or, while evidence might still be around, okay? And all the bitching and moaning about this, there are videos after videos made about it. Well, sure, it might be a bit weird if fundraising from the public, say $100,000, oh, well, now we're just going to make this available for something. That's different. Law enforcement can do what they want. They're under no obligation to put out these rewards and just keep them open-ended just in case someone finally decides to come forward after living a happy little life, safely in security, not helping a major crime being solved. Those people are cunts. They don't deserve the money anyway. If they can't come out and speak up quickly, and maybe a little incentive of $5,000, it might be what they need, because maybe they're so scared. But the money might mean that they think, okay, I'm going to relocate to California after this, and I can do it with a little bit of money, right? It's not just open-ended available. I mean, people, check your values. Check your values, and you're just making up this content just to be inflammatory, just to have another thing to make people pissed off about, who aren't going to stop and think about the reality of it, the normalcy of that being done, and what it actually means. And and why should this reward be open-ended, like that? They want to encourage, they want to solve the crime. They need to do it now. These little girls can't get justice, but what about for Mum, Galen Rose? Well, look, Galen Rose, she doesn't speak. She's not out at CrimeCon, etc., right? She's gone to Florida. Maybe she's scared. Maybe it's because she's a black woman in a really racist county. Okay, we can say that because it's very known that this 2% of people that are of African American descent in certain areas in Indiana, generation after generation of people are racist, and some of them quite openly so. I'm not going to go back into that again, but there is a difference you've got to see too, because Galen Rose isn't doing what the family are doing in Delphi, podcasting, speaking, etc., etc. So there is a lot more focus on Delphi than Flora, but a lot of it is to do with the family and what they are doing, and the intention they are garnering, and yet they're the ones that people want to say are guilty. So, and yet there's the, Galen isn't being outspoken, and, we're told by law enforcement that she hasn't been cooperating with talking to the police in the way that they need, but maybe they're just making accusations because, they're saying that she's not coming forward with who could have had access to the home, who was there, etc. But anyway, I don't really want to talk about Flora ever again, actually, because, it just brings a lot of shit, as does Delphi. But yeah, there, the story of small town cases. Is Jordan's case really cold? They still seem to have a lead, whether it's going to go nowhere or not, They don't know if this SUV cruising back and forth on the street at the exact right time is anything to do with it. Did Sierra just get her time wrong? And, is this van something to do with someone who was either stealing fish prior? Is it to do with the other robberies happening in other small towns down the coast? someone's on a crime spree. They might have thought that Jordan, with his pizza shop, he's just got all the weekend takings, and before, Sunday night would be a time when you'd want to go and rob somewhere, wouldn't you? Like a gas station or something, before people go and do the banking. So, for the week, before the bank opens on Monday morning, right? Is it to do with that? But yeah, I just found it interesting, these two towns. Yeah, I just find there's a lot of similarities there, and so that's why I wanted to talk about it. Thanks for listening. I've got to go to work, but hopefully when I come back to talk about this again, I can talk about things that actually involve, the testimonies, the gossip. I'll talk about Dick, so Rusty's husband, and what people thought about, his involvement and how the police treated him. A lot of it will be about, what actually did happen, with people's testimonies, and because people make a lot of a meal about Kelsey being interrogated several times, right? Well, that's what police do. They did it in this case as well, and to quite a few people. And Gareth's story about that is, it's just such a cliche. It's interesting. So I haven't had live chat on. I've just had top messages. So I don't know, not that I would have missed any. But thanks for being here. We've got Joman, we've got Johnny as well. Have a good day, everybody. I'm going to go off to work. Enjoy whatever you guys are going to go and do. And of course, the comments section will be open. So hopefully people are going to go and watch Ryan Wolf, Brevity Productions, Guilty, Season 1, The Case of Jordan. I can't remember now if you say the S on the end of Jordan's name, but it's Voudouris, Jordan Voudouris, or Voudouris. Look up the case. It's really interesting. The podcast is great. It's a 5-star podcast on all platforms, and easily see why. See you later.